But the Ten Commandment law was not the only one formally set forth by God at Sinai. There was a code of laws, known as ceremonial laws, that gave the rules for the religious rituals that the Jews should follow. For example, their sacrifices and offerings, their annual feast days, the duties of the priesthood. The book of Leviticus is filled with these laws. There were also civil laws to govern the Jews as a nation, such as laws on marriage, divorce, slave holding, property. See Exodus 21. To the extent that the dim spiritual understanding and willingness of the Israelites permitted, the Lord caused these civil statutes to reflect the perfect ideal expressed in the Ten Commandment law. The statute on slaveholding is an illustration of the adaptation of moral principle to the low spiritual state of a people. Of the divorce statute, Christ declared, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, suffered you to put away your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. Matthew 19:8. See Mark 10:4-6. But these ceremonial and civil laws were not given by God directly to the hosts of Israel. As to how God made known these laws, who wrote them, and where they were deposited, the scriptures are clear. First, after stating that the Lord wrote the Ten Commandments upon 2 tables of stone, Moses adds immediately, "And the Lord commanded me at that time to teach you statutes and judgments." Deuteronomy 4:13 and 14. A later Bible writer sets forth the same distinction. "Neither will I make the feet of Israel move any more out of the land which I gave their fathers, only if they will observe to do according to all that I have commanded them, and according to all the law that my servant Moses commanded them." 2 Kings 21:8. In recalling the events of Sinai, Nehemiah, in addressing the Lord, also speaks of the fact that certain laws were spoken by God and others were given to Israel through Moses. "You came down also upon Mount Sinai, and spoke with them from heaven, and gave them right judgments and true laws, good statutes and commandments, and made known unto them your holy Sabbath, and commanded them precepts, statutes, and laws, and by the hand of Moses your servant." Nehemiah 9:13-14. Second, Moses wrote this law. Deuteronomy 31:9. Third, and it came to pass when Moses had made an end of writing the words of this law in a book, until they were finished, that Moses commanded the Levites, which bear the ark of the covenant of the Lord, saying, "Take this book of the law, and put it in the side of the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, that it may be there for a witness against thee." Deuteronomy 31:24-26. The words, "put it in the side of the ark," might seem to suggest that this book was placed within the ark, but that would make it contradict the already quoted words of Scripture that the Decalogue was the only law placed therein. The Revised Version reads, "Put it by the side of the ark." With this translation of the Hebrew, commentators agree. Because of the fact that the ceremonial law and also the civil statutes were written down by Moses and by him given to the people, they are generally described in the Bible as the law of Moses. See, for example, 2 Chronicles 23:18, "Priests to offer burnt offerings as it is written in the law of Moses." 2 Chronicles 13:16, "Priests conducting Passover according to the law of Moses." Ezra 3:2, building of an altar for burnt offerings as it is written in the law of Moses. Daniel 9:13, the destruction of Jerusalem had come as it is written in the law of Moses. Malachi 4:4, remember you the law of Moses my servant, which I commanded unto him in Horeb, Sinai, for all Israel. The New Testament also reveals, in many of its references to the law, the same distinction between the Ten Commandment law and the code of laws given through Moses. Note the following references to the law of rites and ceremonies, sometimes described as the law of Moses, and sometimes simply as the law. Some examples. First, if a man on the Sabbath day receives circumcision, that the law of Moses should not be broken. John 7:23. Second, but there rose up certain of the sect of the Pharisees which believed, saying, that it was needful to circumcise them, and to command them to keep the law of Moses. Acts 15:5. Later in the chapter, when the claim of these Pharisees is restated, it is abbreviated thus: you must be circumcised and keep the law. Verse 24. This well illustrates how a New Testament writer may use the non-qualifying phrase, the law, and yet mean a very specific law, in this instance, the law of Moses. The context is generally sufficient to make clear what law is intended. Certainly, if circumcision is under discussion in the New Testament, and it is often the bone of contention, it is sufficient to refer to the code of laws enjoining circumcision simply as the law, that is, the law of rites and ceremonies given by Moses. Third, the law of commandments contained in ordinances, Ephesians 2:15. Fourth, the sons of Levi, who receive the office of the priesthood, have a commandment to take tithes of the people according to the law, Hebrews 7:5. Fifth, for the priesthood being changed, there is made of necessity a change also of the law, verse 12. Sixth, for the law makes men high priests which have infirmity, verse 28. Seventh, there are priests that offer gifts according to the law, Hebrews 8:4. 8. And almost all things are by the law purged with blood, Hebrews 9:22. 9. For the law, having a shadow of good things to come, and not the very image of the things, can never with those sacrifices which they offered year by year continually, make the comers thereunto perfect. Hebrews 10:1. The Ten Commandment law gives no instruction or information on burnt offerings, the Passover, the building of the altar, the judgments that would come on Jerusalem because of disobedience, circumcision, the order of the priesthood. But the Bible repeatedly reveals that there is a law that does gives such instruction. That law is the ceremonial law, described in the Bible as the law of Moses. It is true that the law of Moses was also the law of God, because God was the author of all that Moses wrote. Hence it is not strange that the Bible writer should, at least occasionally, describe this law of Moses as the law of the Lord, though such instances are few. See, for example, Luke 2:22 and 23, where both phrases are used to describe the same law. However, nowhere in the Bible is the Ten Commandment law called the law of Moses. Note, now, some representative New Testament references to another law, which does not deal with rites and ceremonies, but with moral questions, the Ten Commandment law, which is also referred to at times as simply the commandments. First, if you will enter into life, keep the commandments. Matthew 19:17. Then Christ immediately names several of the 10 commands. Second, and they returned and prepared spices and ointments, and rested the Sabbath day according to the commandment. Luke 23:56. Third, I had not known sin, but by the law, for I had not known lust except the law had said, Thou shalt not covet. Romans 7:7. Fourth, for whosoever shall keep the whole law, and yet offend in one point, he is guilty of all. For he that said, Do not commit adultery, said also, Do not kill. Now if you commit no adultery, yet if you kill, you have become a transgressor of the law. So speak you, and so do, as you that shall be judged by the law of liberty. James 2:10-12. Fifth,